Hey, it's Jacob Berry, and today we're bringing back an excellent chat that we had back in the day with Richard Kimes. This throwback episode from February of 2020 covered how dealerships can keep their customers coming back, especially in the parts and accessories departments. Richard shares smart tips on how to train your team, talk to customers better, and work together between the service and the sales departments. If you work at a dealership or you run one, this episode is going to give you some ideas that you can use right away. Be sure to hit that subscribe so you don't miss the rest of these throwback episodes that we're putting out, and we're bringing you back tips that you can apply. So let's get into it.
What are your kind of initial thoughts on, if I'm at a dealership, what are your initial thoughts on your regular dealership, average, size dealership, which might be a one line or no line, but they sell bikes, they sell parts and accessories. What do you think is step one they need to do to get themselves better training?
Well, I think they have to have a couple things in place. They have to have a general manager or an owner who really believes in the concept of training. Nothing is more effective in my experience than having, the owner or guy responsible for the entire shop really take ownership of that function in terms of holding his staff's feet to the fire. Now, that said, there's a couple different areas that I think have to be absolutely rock solid to have a great shop. You need to have extensive and continuous product training, and that's readily available from most brands in the space or distributors, either live or in an online training scenario. But I think you also need to have at least once a year, if not maybe once or twice a year, perhaps once a quarter, if depending on the needs of the shop. Great customer handling training. I mean, I've worked both in automotive and in power sports, and one thing that comes out of those categories that's been fairly consistent is a level of, end consumer disappointment in the buying process. It's too hard, it's too difficult, yada, yada, yada. But you see that in all kinds of ways. Certainly the rise of, e-commerce and internet sales, particularly in the power sports aftermarket. And the notion of, you have a destination, you have a customer in front of you, what can you do to keep them engaged and, do your best to close a sale? Out of that, I would look at, as effective merchandising training as you can obtain. Sometimes that can be quite extensive or expensive, but there's some basic principles there that have to be really followed to have effective turn at retail. And then I think, if I had to throw a lucky strike extra into this, is really coaching your staff on how to hand off a customer effectively. One of the things I noticed when the business started to have a bit of a downturn was nobody was really stopping riding, and dealerships were taking more and more emphasis on relying on those revenue streams that were working. And one of the main ones there was service. So how can you introduce, a parts and accessories product into a service revenue stream? That was one of the things we coached our guys is, work with the store to, perhaps come to some agreement that, with a service customer who's, an effective guy who's come in for his spring service or what have you, maybe he's earned some sort of discount or premium in a part. Maybe it's a discount on a tank bag or 10% off on a helmet or something like that. And that's relatively basic business skills, but leverage what's working and try and spread it out. That function also speaks to how dealerships should buy. The notion of trying to stock everything you possibly could ever need, I think, has gone away, but it's maybe perhaps gotten too narrow, and that dealerships only wanting to stock things that they know will sell versus sacrificing some level of traffic to those, harder to find parts and accessories to the internet. So that would be my answer to that. But I think a lot of that has to go back to really the GM or the owner having to really embrace training as a concept and hold his staff accountable for it.
One thing I remember back to, and I think of, like, if I had to walk in today and try to be a parts guy, with accessories and parts and all that, of course I'm old and rusty enough where I'd struggle, but I remember to the days I was there and the things that served me well at the time. And some of it was things like what you just mentioned, having the conversation, being inquisitive, really being there, engaging with the customer, not being sidetracked, engaging with them and asking them things like you said, what are you riding? So you can have a better understanding of, well, maybe but you don't know that he's got a bunch of other deals in the garage, a bunch of other bikes or quads or whatever's in the garage. So, and maybe it's, what do you brings you in today? What are you in here for today? He's maybe on a mission. Maybe he wants it, she, right? Wants it very minimized in straight line, but maybe it's, there's something for later. Maybe it's, I'm in here today for this. At some point I'm gonna have to come back and get another one for my kid or my wife or my whoever. Okay, great. Well, come back and see me. We're actually getting in some new colorways, later this month. You think you'll come back then? I can give you a call and let you know those. Okay, great. Yeah, that'd be interesting. Let's do that. Right. So building the now, what's got to happen now to hit their expectation, hopefully exceed it. And then what's set up for later where you can offer service later. And I know that having been one of those guys for a lot of years and really without training in a lot of those ways, you learn trial and error. You learn by who else you're working from. I always joke and say it's like the photocopy of the photocopy. This guy learned it from someone who learned it from someone, and it kind of worked. And I'm picking it up from him, and it kind of works for me. But there's a whole lot there too. Well, I don't want to pester my customers. I don't want to be too much, but I also want to engage. I'll share a funny story that literally last night, an old friend of mine who works for a manufacturer, I won't say who he is or where he works, but he works for a large motorcycle manufacturer, and he's a high-level manager there. I will say where he is. He's in Southern California. He told me last night we were talking about something like this. He went into one of his area's very premier dealerships. That's the brand he works for. Went in there because he rides the bikes, right? That's probably all he has in his garage. But he walked in there and he was talking to me about this story. And I bet you at 5 or 6 points in his story, he was underwhelmed with how they treated him. And it wasn't bad. It wasn't like he walked in and somebody scowled at him or he heard, something that put him off. But he walked in and he said he and his wife walked in. When they got to the door, there were 3 employees with the shirts and potentially name tags. They worked there, walking there. He and his wife walked up. He's like, oh man, I don't go that often. Would be nice. I was ready to go and spend some money for some stuff. And he's like, we got there. My first thing that hit him was that no one had opened the door for them, or his wife, more importantly, right? So he reached out and opened the door for his wife. And as he stands there, there's 3 employees standing there. So there's number one. Obviously, as he's telling me the story, it's obvious that these things hit him. Maybe, didn't make him where he's not going to go to a dealership anymore. But did they hit all the marks they could have, right? So then when he's in, I guess there's like a greeting station or something there. And he said as soon as he came in, somebody was there and kind of ducked down like they're doing something. And he had to look over it and say, whatever, hey, whatever, happy whatever day it was to somebody. He doesn't know these folks. He's not somebody that calls on dealerships. Went back in the back. No one helped him in the parts or the accessories area. And apparently a well-stocked, really nice store. He ended up going and putting his jug of oil on the counter, buying his jug of oil. No sort of extra, it was very transactional, very much like he was at the grocery store, even though the grocery store people tend to ask you a lot of questions these days. I think they're starting to get it. But ultimately, he left there with like whatever, a gallon of oil for one of his motorcycles, right? And he said he left and he felt, the way he described it, he felt underwhelmed. They didn't meet his expectations. Not that he went in there with them, but throughout the process, he learned that, well, that was not what I thought. That was not what I thought. So to a guy like him, right, who's in the industry, I just think as he was telling me this story, I'm thinking, well, what did that guy learn about how the store is really there to serve you? Except for convenience. He walked in same day, walked out with the same stuff. Other than that, Did they show him how important it is that they're in his community and that he should go there? That should be the place he buys it. They didn't. And I hate to hear that kind of story, but, I think we're probably, everybody has bad days. But, I hate to hear that kind of a story, especially in these times when we want to be doing that much more to be able to continue to retain that business from the consumers.
Brian, it's an excellent story. And believe me, I've heard the same story hundreds of times from various people, and myself included. For many years would mystery shop just informally. I'd show up in stores around here without any sort of Helmet House ID and just pretend I was a consumer just to see what it was. And yeah, I could not count on two hands the number of times that same feeling was communicated. And, a funny thing happens in retailing when things get competitive. The stress on finding what you need gets superseded by the experience you have in trying to find it. And this is particularly an issue with younger demographics in our society today. I mean, you might have heard the notion of, baby boomers are all about owning things, but, millennials and Gen Z and that sort of thing, they want experiences. And, I don't disagree with any of that, but the notion of here's an experience that has to be made in a quality way is probably one of the biggest tools a brick and mortar retailer has at their immediate disposal that doesn't require a lot of, infrastructure costs to battle losing customers to the internet. And make them feel special. I mean, it's hard to have someone feel special through the screen of a computer or a tablet or a cell phone. But a little savvy customer handling creates a world of good in terms of making somebody come back and become a regular customer in your go-to place. And that goes back to what I was handling. You need to be a bit of a product expert. You need to be a bit of a customer handling expert. And you really need to be very customer-focused versus the notion of, when they want something, they'll let me know. I don't know, about 10, 15 years ago, it felt like there was this vibe going on where people were basically saying, I want to ask him what he wants. I'll come off as too pushy. Well, there's a way to do that without really being too pushy. And, you're never going to know if you can help them or not unless you ask.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then the notion of upsetting the one guy who doesn't want to be talked to, hey, sorry, let us know if there's anything we can do, be done with it, and he'll figure it out because he wants to figure it out himself. There's always going to be that segment of customer, but, the notion of people, especially in non-needs, more wants, the new helmet, the new chrome piece, or, something, they might not know what they want, but they want to express their enthusiasm through that's a magical and powerful thing. And if you can, leverage that, sales will be generated.
If you're in the secret shopping mode, what do you think? Do you feel like that's a real thing, or is that just what I experienced, or is that?
Oh, no, I mean, it's definitely a real thing because it sort of ignores the basic psychology of the transaction. And it sort of speaks back to what I was talking about. When things get competitive, the driver of the transaction isn't the part needed, it's the experience given. And let's dissect that a little bit. You made the analogy of walking into a relatively expensive restaurant, and your expectations were a little higher. And any kind of big ticket item, whether it's a $99 helmet or a $900 helmet, or a new bike for $10,000 to $15,000 or what have you. What's about to happen? Well, someone's made the effort to come into a store and they're about to give their money to someone, and they want to make sure that they feel smart and respected in doing that, because giving money to someone is a bit of a piece of power in their mind. I mean, that's just basic human emotion. And with competition, if that feeling of I'm doing something good and smart and I'm happy to do it isn't met to some degree, they're going to take their business elsewhere. And there's a lot of, shall we say, reliance on the enthusiast crowd to keep stores coming, and that notion is often falling short in terms of the competitive pressure, if you will. So it goes back to the basic psychology of it. The guy's about to give you, $50, $100, $1,000, what have you. He doesn't have to. He can take his business elsewhere. It's that simple. So,
it wasn't that many years ago, right? It feels like. I mean, I remember working at shops when I first had gone in 1998 or whatever it was when I first started at shops. And we really felt like, and obviously the tides had began to turn at that point. I started seeing it pretty quickly in those years, even with, I bought my helmet online. Man, why didn't you give me a shot at it, But we really felt like we were the conduit through which the consumer had to pass to get the goods, whether it's the bike. Obviously they still have to go to a retail store unless they're buying, driveway to driveway sort of transaction of a used unit or whatever. But the belief was that we were the place. You're going to come to us because we have the stuff. And I don't want to say an arrogance level, because I really still always made the customer very important. And it's hard to do. It's hard to do all day long in a retail setting, to keep and be on your game. I'll always say that, and I'll always give guys props who, if I walk into a place and it's late in the week and maybe late in that day in the week, and the guys are, have good enthusiasm, bravo, because it's hard. It's hard to be there all the time.
Yeah, most marketers get themselves in trouble in very basic ways. And a lot of it I see these days is you're asking the consumer to do too much work to give you their money. And you see it every day in all kinds of different situations. And some of the training that's been happening over the years in the power sports space certainly hasn't helped. I mean, I'll give you a great example. A lot of training that dealerships receive in dealing with distributors is, well, let your distributor be your warehouse. So if something isn't selling, extend your return policy back to them and, switch it out for something else. Well, distributors don't mind doing that. I mean, it's a fact of business. But what you have found over the years is that a lot of products aren't really given a fair chance, so they haven't really been given the sort of retail life cycle opportunity to be in place. And that's an industry infrastructure issue that's hard to solve. But, before you want to return it, have you thought about, putting it on a special sale table and using that as a tool to, create traffic? I mean, you're going to get some money out of it, and sitting there relying solely on the return and switching it into something that might sell is often fraught with all kinds of other ancillary issues. That's one of the big things we always trained our people on is you've got to manage that inventory so that if it isn't turning, then figure out how to get it sold before it comes back. That was one of the biggest metrics we looked at in successful sales reps is, relatively low returns or the timing of a return that was not, it's just done too quickly. The classic example is, selling in mesh jackets and having them returned before the weather ever got hot. It's just a problem. It's just bad business. And, it speaks to how dealerships need to buy to some degree, in that you can't just rely on things will sell. Carrying only black helmets because they're good sellers is, sound business in some ways, but it's not going to build your sales in that department beyond the people who only want black helmets. You need to have, a bit of inventory that creates some broader shoulders with which to build revenue in department. And, that's where taking an experienced sales rep and really training him to be that astute observer, and here's what's working in other stores I work with, and being more of a coach and counselor, not just a salesman, really pays dividends for Helmet House and most of the successful stores we work with.
Do you do geographic Facebook ads or just posts? I mean, I think, to be able to expect that somebody's going to come in and buy because they're in there, your captive audience, so to speak. I think that there's a whole lot of tools beyond that these days to make sure people know they can come to you for that. Oh, I do know that they are known for having this, and I know that they just got a big shipment into that. Is that kind of, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a complex question to answer, but I will give you my best thinking on it because I get asked it all the time. We live in a very unique time in terms of things like marketing and advertising. So much of the tools that are coming online are designed to give marketers or stores, if you will, an understanding of their consumer better than they've ever had. Google Analytics, Facebook Analytics for the commercial account can certainly give you a very good understanding of here are the people who are responding to me, whether that's through the notion of social media or paid AdWords or any other sort of advertising effort involving those technologies. But that's not the only thing that has to happen. You have to sort of draw the line from making customers aware of something you have in a very consistent way across all the different touch points. And that's really where the hard part comes for a lot of stores. My answer to that is assess your local area market and use what you think works because you'll have heart for it. And once you get a program in place, continue to optimize it. And if it doesn't meet your expectations, then you're going to have to adjust it out and try something differently. And the number of stores I've worked with, everyone has their own theory. I've worked with stores that feel that, radio and direct mail is the right answer. And I've worked with stores that feel like a monthly event and seminars for riders and a website is the right answer. And given the number of marketing and advertising tools, a lot of marketers are coming to the point of where they have to be involved to some degree with every possible touch point, a strong website, social media, if they can afford broadcast, what have you. But then it turns into the quality of the messaging, and that is, are you making an offer? Is the offer motivating? If it isn't motivating, why isn't it motivating? A lot of the successful stores that I've worked with, make it clear that, hey, we have the brand you want, we have competitive pricing, and we have great service. And out of those kind of three pillars come all kinds of opportunities, whether it's a quarterly sidewalk sale, parking lot sale scenario, or a staff special night to watch races because you want to create a community, or there's coupons and drivers on the website. But it's got to have a kind of a strategic commitment to it, and then you got to play it out over time. If I see stores do anything wrong, is they don't try hard enough and long enough before they say, well, that didn't work. I can't count on two hands, as I said before, the number of stores that, they decide they want to have some sort of parking lot event, but they don't do anything to promote it and nobody shows up. And they go, well, that didn't work. Well, like I said, you've got to lay it out to where consumers know it's there, they're motivated to come in, and then if you're really good, giving them an experience and, a satisfactory time so that they'll keep putting it on their calendar. It's that simple. I mean, consumers are bombarded with marketing messages and offers, and you've got to kind of break through all of that noise to where it's something meaningful. And believe me, there's always people in the marketplace. It's just you've got to make it clear that you're here and you're ready to do business.
I really appreciate you jumping on. Your insights are golden, because you've got all those years of experience. And like I say, especially since you've got a big advertising background behind that, to me, it means that you're a guy that's plugged in and, knows as a consumer and obviously someone that worked with dealerships to help serve consumers, what exactly were we missing it? So
it's all about assessing the needs of the market and delivering on those needs. It's really that simple. That's what I've always been trained to do. I've tried to train others to do it and been fairly successful with it. And, been consulting to various firms in this area, and it's been going pretty well. Thank you so much, Brian, for the opportunity. Anytime you want to chat more, if there's more things I can help with, please don't hesitate to ask, and good luck.
I'd love to. I appreciate the offer. We'll do that.
Thanks again for listening to this lost tape of the Dealership Fix It podcast. These guest interviews still hit hard, and we're bringing them back re-edited, sharpened up, and focused entirely on what matters, helping dealerships like yours improve, grow, and win. If you got something out of this one, hit that share button or forward it to a dealership friend who needs it. And make sure you're following the show so we can keep bringing you more content like this with convos with people shaping the power sports industry. Catch you on the next one.
Still guessing what to pay on a used bike? Still holding aged units that just won't move? It's time for a real system. Moto Hunt's ultimate used inventory playbook shows how the best dealers are finding better inventory, pricing trades right, and turning used bikes faster with fewer mistakes and more margin. It's short, real, and free to download right now. Visit dealers.motohunt.com to grab your copy or check for the link in the notes.